So the research is part of my PhD research, in which I focus on sexual violence at higher education institutions in Indonesia. And sexual violence is a deeply rooted problem in Indonesian academia, just as it is globally. But in the last approximately 7 years, the wider Indonesian society has gained more of a focus on the topic of sexual violence, because since 2018, more and more cases are going viral in the media, which has led to nationwide student protest. And in 2019, a journalistic investigative collaboration collected and published 174 testimonies of victim survivors of sexual harassment from 79 universities. And in 2020, Gerak Perempuan, which is the Women's Movement Alliance, also protested in front of the Education Ministry to demand change, which actually led the then Education Minister in 2020 to form a task force to write the first policy on sexual violence. And what is very important in this is that he chose one of the activists of Gerak Perempuan to write and lead this process, which then led in 2021 to the publication of the first education policy on sexual violence. And in the midst of all of this, or the reforms were not everyone was very happy about these reforms, especially religious authorities were highly contesting those policies on or regarding their idea of consent, believing that consent would legitimize premarital sex and would therefore promote what they called free sex. So in the midst of all of this, I conducted my field research in 2020 during the implementation process of the policy. And I conducted 52 interviews with students, staff from 19 different universities in Indonesia, as well as with ministry staff, legal aid workers, and activists. And the three key findings that I find connecting to this workshop that we're doing here are: first, policy evasion through legal pluralism. So who knows Indonesia knows that there is a context of legal pluralism at stake. In very short terms, it would mean that depending on your religion or your ethnicity, certain laws apply to you or not. And this is being used by especially Islamic universities, to argue that they fall under the religious affairs ministry and therefore do not have to follow the education policy, which actually is not true, but they're using this aspect of legal pluralism to not follow the policy. And second, seniority silences survivors. So in Indonesia, the cultural hierarchy is very much in place, and it translates into the university, but also very strongly into the student body. So seniors, simply the ones that study a year before above you, are sometimes called as godlike figures, which then of course has an impact on whether or not students come forward when they have experienced sexual violence. And third, visibility drives change. We've heard it a lot today. In the Indonesian context, it is very much watershed cases and media attention connected with student protests that drive universities to actually implement the change. And so what does that mean? My research shows that student activism, public visibility, and informal networks, also as we've heard today, are often more effective in pushing universities than simply national policies. And it also highlights how religious opposition, entrenched hierarchies, and legal ambiguity limit the reach of these national reforms. And I think it is needed to have more research on cases outside of the global north, to also have an understanding of context-sensitive research, because obstacles to fight and prevent sexual violence are also context-sensitive.